and welcome to another booktube video from me, Lauren, from Lauren and the Books. I hope you're all having a lovely Sunday. This is the last video in September, so therefore it is the second part of my September wrap-up. So I've read quite a lot in September, and because of that I split my wrap-up into two, which I don't often do. I will link part one down below if you haven't gone and watched it already. I think I've read like 12 books in the first half of September. Whoa, we were. But I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to wrap up that I read in the second half. And yeah, really good reading month September. I've read some really good books in September, so I'm hoping that October gifts me with the same levels of good reading. So the first book that I finished in the second half of September was The Testaments by Margaret Atwood. Now I've got to say, I really love this book. I went to it with trepidation and excitement, all of those things, thinking I love The Handmaid's Tale. I feel like it's one of the scariest books that I have read, and went to this thinking, will it live up to it? How's it going to be? And for me, I bloody loved it. Now what I will say, I haven't watched any of the TV series of The Handmaid's Tale, and I feel like maybe for me that aided me when I was reading this book, because I haven't got any sort of like background knowledge. The character Aunt Lydia, who features sort of incrementally in the first book, and but isn't a main character. I believe her to be a main character in the series, and she is also one of the 3 perspectives that we hear of in the Testaments. I loved hearing from 3 different perspectives. You hear from Aunt Lydia and sort of like where she's come from and how she become the person of power that she is now. And one of her chapters in particular was my favourite chapter from the book, but also the most terrifying chapter ever, and it talks about how she was a judge, where she worked as a judge, and one day they sort of came for all the female judges and they took them all, and because they were women of a certain education and women of a certain age, they took them to a particular place and they took them to this stadium and they just left them there, and there they'd feed them once a day, and they were all in their sort of like work clothes, and then after they'd been there for a while, they would start bringing in women and shooting them in front of them, and then this was originally done by men, and then eventually women start doing this. They start seeing women coming in these brown cassocks and shooting these things. Anyway, so it's just been, she's been living this awful life there, and they take her to something called a think tank, and they beat her and they leave her in darkness and they treat her like shit, and it's just all awful. And then after 7 days in this think tank, they take her to a hotel, and they give her clothes, and she's got access to a shower and food, and they tell her to rest. And then one morning she wakes up and next to the bed is a brown cassock, and she says she put it on because what choice did she have? And just the atmosphere she created in that chapter alone, I was just horrified, terrified, amazed that she'd been able to create this in quite a short space of time. And it just, yeah, it really stayed with me, and that was my favourite chapter within the book. However, there are 2 other perspectives you hear from. You hear from the perspective of a girl who doesn't live in Gilead. She lives in Canada, and she works in a clothes shop with her parents, and she's sort of like looking from the outside in at what Gilead's doing, and you're introduced to ways that Gilead are now recruiting people. So from this perspective you hear about the Pearl Girls who are sent out into the outside world to sort of recruit people to come back to Gilead, and that's another perspective. And then the final perspective is told from a girl within Gilead, a young girl who is living with her family at the moment, and then she begins to train to become a wife, and she decides that she doesn't want to do that and she wants to become an aunt, and then you hear about her perspective from that. But yeah, I thought it was amazing. I really loved it. I was so gripped. I was really impressed that it managed to grip me so much, because although I read a lot of Atwood and I enjoy her books, I've never felt gripped during one of her books as much as I have this, and for me just the reading experience was brilliant. I gave it 5 stars. I really thought it was amazing, and really loved it. And also, just as an aside, I really love this front cover. So you've got this front cover here with the silhouette of a handmaid, and then here you've got a girl in there, and then also you've got this girl's ponytail here, and then within that you've got a handmaid here. And yeah, I just feel like, yeah, I really enjoyed it. I gave it 5 stars. Well done, Margaret Atwood. The next book I read was also a very, very good book. 4 stars I gave this. This was Three Women by Lisa Taddeo. This is a non-fiction account of 3 women's lives and how they're sort of manipulated by, not just manipulation, but like there's a lot about sex in here. You follow Lena, who all she ever wanted to have was this husband and children, and she's got this life now, and her husband's not interested in her sexually, and she looks elsewhere for sexual relationships, in particular to an ex-boyfriend from when she was at school. And that story, I say storyline, it's real life. So that woman's account of life saddened me the most, I think, because she was just so willing to drop everything just to be there for this bloke who would shag her on occasion, and then just sort of like he would forget about her until the next time they shagged. He had a life as well, and like it just made me really, really sad. And then Maggie's, you follow Maggie, I would say, is the woman that features mostly throughout this book, and she had an affair with her teacher when she was at school, and now she's sort of trying to bring that, she's trying to get him imprisoned or get him charged for this. And he's a very upstanding member of the community. He recently won like Teacher of the Year, and the whole community turns against her basically because they can't believe that this has happened, and etc. And then you're following Sloane, who is married and in an open relationship. Her and her husband sleep with other people, and he particularly likes to watch her sleep with men. And yeah, you follow their relationships, and it was just very insightful, but like really sad in places, like hearing these women just sort of do things that they didn't really want to do, and they would do anyway. But I really, really found it like incredibly well written and incredibly well described. The sexual accounts in here are like really, there's a lot of sex in here, and it's definitely for the older reader. But yeah, very much enjoyed it, gave it 4 stars. Then I read a YA book, Toffee, by Sarah Crossan. Sarah Crossan is an author who writes in verse. I've read a few of her books now. This is the 3rd or 4th of hers I've read, and this is following Alison. This was really, really sad, like really sad. It's following Alison, who at the beginning, what I always find is so amazing how you're able to you learn so much from like one poem about a person. Like I feel like it's delivered so well. So for instance, let me try and find one here. Like, so this is this poem here is entitled M5, and you like what you can learn in that poem compared to what you could learn in a whole chapter of a novel just amazes me. Every time I read something like this, I'd find it amazing. I recently read The Poet X by Elizabeth Taddeo. No, that's Elizabeth Acevedo, I think it is. Oh no, Acevedo. Taddeo wrote Three Women, and yeah, I just feel like the amount of information you'll get in such a beautiful way is just amazing. But anyway, this book, Toffee, is about Alison, who has run away from home, and you learn as the book goes on that this is due to the fact that she's been abused by her father physically, and she goes to Bude to try and meet up with her, I guess you would call this character her stepmother, to try and find her because she's recently left her father because of the same reasons. And she comes across an old house which is seemingly not being lived in and stays in the shed. And then after a while, she realises that there is an older woman living in there. And she approaches the older woman, and the old woman addresses her as Toffee and believes her to be someone else. And it shows that you quickly learn that this old lady is going through dementia, and you have Alison trying to look out for oh my god, I've forgotten her name. Marla. You have Alison trying to look after Marla. You have Marla who doesn't even know it, but she's looking after Alison. And yeah, I just found it really sad. I found it really beautifully done and very much enjoyed it, so I gave that 3 stars. Then the next book I listened to an audio book, and that was The Night Watch by Sarah Waters, and this is actually the book that we are currently reading for my Patreon book club, so I'm not going to go into too much detail here. I listened to this, I've read this before, and I listened to it, but here is the book, because sometimes when I'm listening to things, sometimes I like to read along with them as well. Interesting. But really, really enjoyed the audio of this, found it really interesting how listening to an audio of voices can change characters for you. But yeah, you follow a what's interesting about this book is that it's set in different, so it's set in the 40s, but you start at the end of the 40s, hear about these 4 characters, then you go to the mid 40s, hear about these 4 characters, then the beginning of the 40s, and then hear about those 4 characters. So it's set like when the war, it's set with wartime Britain happening, and you're following a character called Duncan, who when you first visit him you find out that he is living with a man called Mr. Mundy. He's out of prison, but you're not quite sure what for. You also follow his sister Viv, who is embroiled in an affair with a man called Reggie, who it seems from the what you're hearing is that she's not really that into this affair, and you're like, why is that happening? You also follow Kay, who works as part of an ambulance crew, collecting people who have been hurt in air raids, and you also follow Helen and Julia. Oh, Helen. And yeah, I really enjoyed this. I really like the characters. I feel like it's impressive how much of suspense and intrigue she can build, as I'm going back thinking, well, how is this, like, why was Duncan in prison? Why is Thingy so not nonplussed by this guy he's having an affair with, by this guy she's having an affair with? And then as you work back, by the time you find out the things that happened, they're like old friends to you. She really creates this sort of familiarity around the characters. And yeah, I really love Sarah Waters' writing. I've been very lucky to like read all of her books and love all of them. The only one I haven't read is Fingersmith, which I don't know where I've put that, but I'm hanging on to it because it's the only one I haven't read at the moment. But yeah, really love this. Looking forward to discussing it Sunday night, so tonight when you see me doing this. And then the next book I've read is a book that David and I have just sat and read by ourselves, just over there on the sofa, and that is Franklin and Luna and the Book of Fairytales, written by my good pal Jen Campbell and illustrated by Katie Hardett. We love these books. Every time when the time of the year comes around that they release, me and David are always excited to sit and read it together, and I've just done very well. Oh, they're just so beautiful, and I've just done very well to sort of buy everybody these books for Christmas, all the children I know in life. And this is the last, it was a trilogy, and this is the last in the trilogy. But this follows Franklin and Luna. It's Franklin's birthday. He thinks everybody's forgotten, but really there is a secret party being planned, and in order to take his mind off of this, the fact that this is happening, Luna takes Franklin to a bookshop and they fall into a book of fairy tales. One of my favourite things in this book, I mean there's so many, but first of all I love the fact that this is the woman who owns the bookshop, and she's in a velvet dressing gown. Just so, like, the language just brings so much to my mind when she's discussing it. I also like the fact that they find themselves in a dark forest which smells of paper, ink and porridge, and yeah, I just feel like there's so much in it for adults and children alike. Love it, adore it. So those are the books that I read in the month, the second half of September. Would be very interested to hear what you read in September. Would be interested in hearing people's thoughts on the Testaments. Been keeping my eyes very peeled for that appearing in people's wrap-ups and book reviews on it, because I'm interested to hear what people think about it. Now, today is Saturday, so David and now is strictly on tonight. So David and I are now going to do a food shop. We've got to go to the storage unit, and we're going to do a few chores, and then strictly tonight. So hope you're having a lovely weekend, and we'll speak to you again soon. Bye!